My name is Jordan Reeve, and at 33, I never imagined slipping into my family's birthday dinner as the poverty-stricken cleaner they all pitied. I always believed my empire would stay hidden in silence, until Forbes dropped a viral teaser announcing me as their newest self-made billionaire. In that heartbeat, I tasted fierce triumph and stunned disbelief, all at once. But before I reveal how they reacted, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever turned everyone's doubt into your greatest victory, smash that like button. The scent of bleach and lemon cleaner clung to my skin as I dropped my keys onto the dented metal counter in my tiny Denver apartment. It was nearly midnight, and the silence wrapped around me like a thin, fraying blanket. My back ached from scrubbing baseboards for hours, and my hands stung from chemicals that no lotion could fully repair. The room smelled like work. Clean, sterile, exhausted. All I wanted was a shower hot enough to burn the day off and maybe 6 hours of sleep before repeating it all over again. To my family, this was all I ever amounted to. The house cleaner. The girl who never figured it out. They never said it outright, but their voices, too soft, too pitying, told me everything. To them, I was the weak link, the one stuck in neutral, while they climbed ladders and posted success stories on LinkedIn. What they didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask, was that every toilet I scrubbed, every marble floor I polished, every hour I spent hunched over someone else's mess was part of a plan I had spent years perfecting. A blueprint for something much bigger than any of them had ever dreamed. Something I built quietly, strategically, while they dismissed me as background noise. The red light on my answering machine blinked in the dark like an insult. I pressed play, already knowing what I'd hear. "Hey, Jordan," came Rachel's voice. My older sister, professional marketing queen, always with a fake smile tucked behind her tone. "Just a reminder that Dad's birthday dinner is this Sunday, 6 p.m. sharp. Don't forget like last year." "Next messagey?" she added, almost as an afterthought. "We're ordering from Jasper's, so maybe eat beforehand if it's, tight this week." Third message. My dad's gruff baritone. "No weird thrift store stuff this time. Just be on time, say happy birthday, and don't make it about you." I stood in that tiny kitchen for a long time, letting their words settle like dust. They thought they were being helpful, thoughtful even. But what they really meant was, stay in your place. Stay small, stay invisible. What they didn't know was that I owned 4 companies, had crossed my first $1 million mark 5 years ago, and just last week, Forbes had emailed me for an exclusive Sunday feature, the billionaire who cleaned her way to the top. I hadn't answered yet, not because I was unsure, but because I was finally, utterly ready. Ready to stop hiding, ready to step into the light, not with fanfare, not with a speech, but with proof. I'd let them think I was struggling for so long that my silence had become part of my identity. But that silence had also been my shield, protecting the grind, guarding the growth, making room for a future that was finally here. And what they could never know was that it had all started 10 years ago, at a dinner just like the one I was about to attend. 10 years ago, when I was 23, fresh out of a breakup, broke, grieving my grandmother, and barely holding it together. I'd walked into a family gathering, wearing the same thrifted blouse I'd worn 3 weeks straight, and my dad looked me up and down and said, "Still cleaning other people's messes." Pathetic. That moment scorched itself into my memory, not because it broke me, but because it made me burn. That was the night I stopped hoping for their approval. And the night I started building something none of them would see coming. 10 years ago, I was 23, broke, and fresh out of a relationship that had drained me of more than just my savings. I had left college a semester before graduating to care for the one person in my life who had ever made me feel like I wasn't a burden. My grandmother. She raised me when my parents were too busy with their careers and their image, and when her health began to fade, I dropped everything. No one else in the family stepped up. Not Rachel with her expensive shoes and business. Not Marcus with his endless excuses about his finance job. And certainly not my parents who sent a few checks but never showed up. When she passed away, I was alone. No degree, no job, No savings. Just a tiny box apartment, a dented microwave, and an aching silence I couldn't fill. I took the only job I could get, cleaning houses. It was supposed to be temporary, just a way to pay rent until I figured out what came next. But life has a way of surprising you when your back is against the wall. That first week, while vacuuming a grand staircase in an oversized home in Cherry Creek, something shifted. I saw how the wealthy lived, not just what they owned, but how they moved, what they outsourced, how they organized their lives. It fascinated me. I watched everything. I listened. I took mental notes. What kind of linen they used, how they labeled their pantries. What small details made their homes feel different from the chaos I had come from. I became obsessed not with the wealth itself, but with the systems behind it. How did they create environments that functioned so effortlessly, while mine always felt like a fire that never stopped spreading? And then one day, I was assigned to clean the home of Clara Whitmore. She was older, elegant, with the kind of generational wealth you don't flash. You just wear like skin. But she wasn't cold. She was curious. "You're sharp," she said one afternoon, after I reorganized her kitchen cabinets in under an hour. "Too sharp to be wasting your energy on bleach and baseboards." I told her I didn't have the luxury of dreaming big. She smiled at me and handed me a book, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. "Read it," she said. "Then come back next week and tell me what you think." I read it that night, every page. Twice. Then I went back and read 5 more just like it. Something woke up inside me. Something that had been buried under years of survival mode and small thinking. I began to wake up earlier each morning, spending that hour before work reading, listening to podcasts, watching TED Talks, absorbing everything I could about entrepreneurship, service models, systems thinking. While scrubbing bathroom tiles, I would analyze how these people ran their households. I realized they didn't want cleaners. They wanted order, quiet efficiency, discretion, trust. And slowly an idea began to form. What if I created a company that offered more than just cleaning? What if I redefined home management for the high-end market? What if I turned everything I was doing, everything people dismissed as low skill, low value, into a luxury experience they couldn't live without? The idea pulsed through me like electricity. I started saving every dollar. I stopped eating out, canceled every subscription, cut every non-essential expense. I slept on a mattress on the floor in a shared apartment for nearly a year. Rice and frozen vegetables became my diet. I didn't complain. I was building. I kept my cleaning jobs, sometimes working 3 homes a day. But every spare minute and ounce of energy went into the dream. I built a business plan. Took a free online course in accounting. Studied branding and consumer psychology at the public library with a second-hand laptop. On weekends, I volunteered for event setups just to observe how premium services operated behind the scenes. I learned how to speak the language of value, not just service, but identity, perception, and experience. And when I had just enough scraped together, I launched Sterling Haven, a premium lifestyle and home management company with a clean, elegant website and a promise. "You handle your success. We handle the rest." It wasn't just a tagline. It was a declaration. One I whispered to myself every morning as I zipped up my second-hand coat and stepped into a borrowed vacuum van. And just like that, without a single soul in my family knowing, I took my first real step out of the shadows. Quietly, strategically, unapologetically. In the first year after launching Sterling Haven, I lived on instinct, caffeine, and a color-coded planner that never left my side. My office was just a folding table wedged between a bin of cleaning rags and an old lamp in the corner of my bedroom. I answered every client call, scheduled every appointment, drove my beat up van from home to home, and cleaned alongside the first 2 employees I managed to convince to join me. I slept no more than 4 hours a night, fueled by adrenaline and the quiet rage of someone who had been underestimated one too many times. Every minute mattered, every detail counted. There was no room for sloppiness, no margin for error. Clara's referrals were the first spark. 1 high-profile client turned into 3, then 5, then a small elite circle of people who valued privacy, precision, and discretion. I didn't just scrub their kitchens. I learned their routines, memorized their preferences, and created custom systems to make their homes feel effortlessly managed. I trained my team to do the same. We weren't housekeepers, we were problem solvers, curators of peace in households where chaos was unacceptable. Word began to spread among the right people, and Sterling Haven started to look less like a hustle and more like a movement. By the end of year 2, we had 12 full-time staff and a waiting list that stretched across 3 cities. I introduced digital service logs, personalized household guides, and weekly training that included guest experts in luxury etiquette and client communication. My employees didn't just clean, they anticipated. They solved problems before they existed. They became trusted fixtures in homes worth tens of millions. And our clients noticed. They left glowing feedback, referred their friends, and quietly became our most powerful marketing engine. Meanwhile, back at family dinners, nothing had changed. I still wore old jeans and brought store-brand wine. Rachel still boasted about her agency's game-changing pitch deck. Marcus still droned on about quarterly returns. My parents smiled at them with pride, and then turned to me with soft eyes and questions like, "Still working those long shifts, honey?" I let them believe it. I let them think I was tired, stuck small. There was power in invisibility. It gave me space to build uninterrupted. I didn't want their approval. I wanted freedom. And that meant staying quiet, staying underestimated, until the time was right. In year 3, we expanded to New York, Manhattan, then the Hamptons. I brought on regional managers, leased a small but sleek office space, and launched a client-facing mobile app that allowed seamless scheduling and service customization. We added Sterling Concierge, a premium tier for clients who wanted everything from errand runs to vacation home prep. My name still wasn't public. I chose anonymity not out of fear, but because I knew how the world judged a young woman of color in the service industry. People trusted polished brands and ambiguous founders more than someone like me. So I stayed in the background, letting the business speak for itself. By year 4, we had passed $10 million in annual revenue. I still drove my old Honda. I still wore my worn sneakers to family events. I still let my mom slip me discount grocery coupons with a sympathetic smile. They had no idea I owned real estate in 3 states, that I had investors approaching me and licensing deals on the table, that my operations were expanding overseas. They didn't know that the struggling housekeeper sitting at their table was building something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. And honestly, I didn't care if they ever found out. The silence wasn't just protection, it was power. Because the best kind of power is the kind no one sees coming, and I was just getting started. The Sunday of my father's birthday arrived with that tense kind of clarity that only comes when you already know what's about to happen. I woke up early, brewed my coffee, and sat in the quiet of my penthouse, looking out at the Denver skyline. The air was crisp, the light soft. Everything felt precise, controlled. The feature with Forbes was scheduled to go live the next morning at 900 a.m. sharp, part of their Sunday Spotlight series. They'd teased it on Twitter and Instagram, a silhouette photo of me with the caption, "From mop to mogul, meet the woman who built $1 billion empire in silence." They didn't know yet. Not my parents, not Rachel, not Marcus. They still thought I was the same girl barely scraping by. And I had chosen not to correct them. Not out of spite, but because I wanted the moment to land. I wanted the reveal to echo. So yes, I was going to dinner. I was going to sit at that same table, endure the same passive-aggressive comments and pitying glances, and then I was going to let the truth drop on them the next morning like thunder on glass. I pulled into the parking lot of Jasper's, a high-end Italian steakhouse tucked into the edge of downtown, just before 6. The lot was already packed, and I parked behind a matte, black Range Rover I recognized as Marcus's. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the valet jog from car to car beneath the warm glow of string lights and curated jazz. My vehicle, a 10-year-old Honda Civic I kept for occasions exactly like this, didn't draw a single look. Perfect. I stepped out, handed the keys to the valet, and walked through the double doors. Inside, I spotted Rachel waving from a long table near the back, her voice rising above the low hum of clinking glasses. "Jordan," she called out. "You're on time." I'm shocked. I smiled, kept it calm. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said as I leaned in toward him. He barely looked up from the wine list. "You look tired," he muttered. "Long day of cleaning." The jab hit its mark, delivered like a reflex, sharp and familiar. I smiled. "You could say that." My mother gave me her usual half hug and a gentle pat on the arm. "We're just glad you could make it, sweetie." "I know work keeps you busy," I nodded. "Always." The waiter arrived, took our orders, and the conversation immediately turned into a highlight reel of my siblings' latest accomplishments. Rachel was talking about some campaign her agency had just launched, something to do with influencers and skincare, and Marcus had just closed on a small place in Telluride. I listened, sipped my water, and offered polite nods. They didn't ask about my week. They never did. Then, somewhere between appetizers and the second glass of wine, Rachel glanced at her phone and perked up. "Oh my God. Did you guys see the teaser for Forbes Sunday Spotlight tomorrow?" she asked, turning the screen toward the table. "They're profiling this self-made billionaire woman. Former housekeeper. Wild, right?" She laughed. "Imagine that. Going from toilets to tech." "What's her name?" I asked, eyes calm. Rachel squinted at the screen. Jordan Reeve. Or Ree, something like that. "Kinda sounds like yours, huh?" She laughed again. "Anyway, crazy." No one else commented. My dad was too focused on his steak. My mom was sipping Chardonnay, likely not even listening. I smiled to myself and glanced down at my napkin. I could have said something. Could have ended it right there. But I didn't, because tomorrow they'd all see. And for once, I wouldn't have to say a single word. The rest of the dinner unfolded with a kind of predictability that was almost comforting in its absurdity. Rachel was in full performance mode, perched like a peacock at the end of the table, going on about her latest brand campaign. "We're rolling out this integrated cross-platform strategy," she said with theatrical hand gestures. "Targeted influencer aligned, hyper-local, super bleeding edge." Marcus, not to be outdone, steered the conversation to real estate and crypto, casually mentioning he had just made a modest investment in an retreat outside Telluride. My parents nodded like it was a press briefing. Every new detail was met with affirmations and proud smiles. It was all so rehearsed, so effortlessly transactional. Everyone at that table had a script, and they were playing their parts like professionals. Me? I stayed quiet. As usual, I asked the polite questions, complimented the food, smiled when someone made a joke at my expense. It was the role I'd played for so long, I could slip into it like a second skin. I was the blurry background figure in every family portrait, the one you forget to look for. It was almost impressive how much they didn't ask. Not once had anyone turned to me and said, "What are you building these days?" Or, "What excites you right now?" It wasn't just that they thought I wasn't doing much. It was that they couldn't imagine I ever would. When dessert arrived, oversized goblets of tiramisu with just the right amount of bitterness, I started to gather my things. My father gave me a sideways glance. "You heading out?" he asked like it was an inconvenience to notice. "Yeah," I replied. "Early start tomorrow." He smirked into his scotch. "Still cleaning toilets?" The table chuckled. Rachel bit her lip to suppress a laugh. And even Marcus grinned into his coffee. My mother, ever the diplomat, laid a hand on mine. "Your work may not be glamorous, Jordan," she said gently. "But you've always been hardworking. We're proud you're trying." Trying. That word echoed. It wasn't meant to hurt, but it did, because it said everything. In their eyes, I was still struggling, still aspiring, still beneath them. I had become so good at staying small in their world, they couldn't even fathom another version of me. And yet, I didn't feel bitter, not anymore. In fact, there was something almost poetic about it. The quiet before the storm, the breath before the curtain lifts. They had no idea they were dining with the very story they'd wake up to the next morning. As I stood, Rachel piped up, full of smirking confidence. "Hey, don't forget your gloves next time. You could tidy up my place while you're at it." She laughed like she'd delivered the line of the night. Marcus chuckled behind his napkin. My dad raised an eyebrow, amused. I turned slightly, met Rachel's eyes, and held her gaze just long enough for the silence to stretch. "See you tomorrow," I said. They thought I meant brunch. What I really meant was 900 a.m., when Forbes Sunday Spotlight would air across the country, featuring a 15-minute profile on the billionaire founder of Sterling Haven. My name, my face, my story. The company I built from bleach and nothingness. The empire they never saw taking shape because they were too busy dismissing the woman behind it. They didn't know that the teaser had already gone viral overnight. That their friends and colleagues were already sharing it. That my face would be the first thing they'd see on every social media app in the morning. Not in a post I sent. Not in a text they ignored. But on a national broadcast where the whole world would recognize me before they ever did. They wouldn't learn about me through a conversation or a family confession. They would learn it like everyone else from headlines, from a glowing voiceover, from a spotlight I no longer had to earn. Because I wasn't trying anymore, I had already won. Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear. Sunlight filtered through the massive windows of my penthouse, casting long golden lines across the marble floor. I stood barefoot, coffee in hand, gazing out over the skyline like a queen surveying her kingdom. The city looked calm, unaware, but I knew that calm was about to crack. At exactly 8:50 a.m., I turned on the TV. The countdown for Forbes Sunday Spotlight had already begun. I'd watched the final cut twice, but this time felt different. This time, it wasn't just for me. It was for them. My family, who would be flipping through channels right about now. Expecting another feel-good success story about someone they didn't know. But this time, it would be about someone they thought they knew. Someone they had ignored, dismissed, and overlooked for years. Someone who had built something extraordinary, right under their noses. The theme music swelled. The screen shifted to a sleek title card, The Billionaire Housekeeper, How One Woman Built an Empire from the Shadows. Then, the voiceover began. Today, we profile Jordan Reeve, founder and CEO of Sterling Haven, the premium home and lifestyle service revolutionizing luxury living across 6 cities. But what makes her story unique isn't just the billion-dollar valuation, the elite clientele, or the innovation. It's where it started: a mop, a vacuum, and a secret. I watched as the footage rolled, me in the early days, loading supplies into a rusted van, scrubbing granite countertops, flipping through business books at the public library, sitting on the floor of a tiny apartment with index cards taped to the wall. My younger self looked tired, but determined. The kind of tired that comes from dreaming while surviving. Then came interviews. Clients praising our discretion and excellence, advisors highlighting our growth trajectory, and my executive team smiling with unmistakable pride. Next, the camera cut to me walking through our Denver headquarters, tailored blazer, heels clicking on marble, confidence in every step. Behind me, the Sterling Haven logo gleamed like a crown. My voice played over the imagery. I didn't tell anyone what I was building. I didn't need the noise. I needed clarity. Then came the part I'd been waiting for. "Why didn't you tell your family?" the interviewer asked. The shot cut to me, seated, calm, eyes steady. "Because they didn't ask," I said. "Because they were too busy assuming I had failed. Because I didn't need permission to succeed. I just needed space to grow." The screen faded to black. A pause. Then the final words appeared: Jordan Reeve, billionaire, builder, daughter. The segment ended, the credits rolled. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Calls, texts, missed calls, voicemails. My name was trending. The media cycle had begun. Articles were already circulating. Mogul in disguise. The quiet rise of Jordan Reeve. From cleaning supplies to corporate strategy. And right on cue, the family group chat erupted. "Mom, Jordan, we just saw the news. Is this real?" Rachel, OMG. "That's you? Why didn't you say anything?" Marcus. "You built Tat? Are you kidding me?" "Dad, call me. We need to talk." Now, I set the phone down gently on the table and stared out the window again. The city looked different now, brighter somehow. Or maybe I had simply stopped shrinking beneath it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even smug. I was ready. They wanted answers, but for once, I wasn't going to give them in words. Not yet. Because the story had already been told, clean, complete, undeniable. I had already said everything I needed to, and the world had heard me. By noon, the noise was deafening. The Forbes feature was everywhere, on every major financial site, reshared by influencers, quoted by startup founders, even trending on LinkedIn. People I hadn't spoken to in years were tagging me in posts, hailing me as an inspiration, a disruptor, a genius. But I wasn't watching any of it. I already knew the story. I had lived every word. Instead, I was listening for one thing: the silence from my family. That silence was louder than applause. At 1:37 p.m., Rachel called. I didn't answer. 2 minutes later, Marcus. Then Dad. I let them ring. I wasn't being cruel. I was just done rushing to explain myself. Instead, I got dressed. No makeup, no designer statement, just a black turtleneck, fitted jeans, and my favorite gray wool coat, the one Clara Whitmore gave me after I reorganized her entire estate wardrobe in under 3 hours. Simple lines, she'd told me, command quiet respect. I walked to the garage and unlocked my Rolls Royce Ghost. Not the image of struggle they were used to, but today wasn't about struggle, it was about clarity. The drive was short, familiar. The street hadn't changed. Still the same houses with American flags on the porch. Still the same kids playing on scooters. Still the same house where my ambition had once been considered unrealistic. I parked in front of my parents' home. Curtains fluttered. Eyes were watching. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door almost instantly. She looked stunned, shaken, but not hostile. Her voice was barely a whisper. Jordan, we saw the broadcast. I figured, I said quietly. She stepped aside and I walked in. The same hallway. The same smell. It was like stepping into a memory that had stopped evolving. My father stood from his recliner. You blindsided us, he said flatly. You made us look like we didn't know our own daughter. You didn't, I said. Because you never tried. Rachel emerged next, still holding her phone. Is all of it true? The company, the valuation, the everything. All of it, I replied. I didn't exaggerate anything. I didn't have to. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. You could have told us. We're family. Jordan. I took a breath. Family means different things to different people. To me, it meant never being asked what I cared about. Never being taken seriously. I stopped explaining myself when I realized no one was really listening. My mother's voice cracked. We thought you were struggling. You assumed, I said softly but firmly. Because the truth would have made you uncomfortable. Because it was easier to pity me than to ask what I was building. My father's jaw clenched. And now what? You want to lecture us? Rub it now, I said. I don't want anything from you, not validation, not credit. I just wanted to walk through this door one more time, not as the girl who needed your approval, but as the woman who earned her own. Rachel sat down on the armrest, still stunned. I always thought you were lost. And I always knew you weren't looking, I said. Silence filled the room. For once, no one had a comeback. My mom stepped closer. We were wrong. All of us, I'm sorry. I nodded. I know. She looked down, her eyes glassy. You didn't just build a company, you built yourself. That, I hadn't expected. I felt my throat tighten. Yeah, I said. I did. And standing there, surrounded by all the people who had once written me off, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Not because they apologized, but because I no longer needed them to. 1 week after the Forbes broadcast, the world hadn't stopped talking. My inbox was bursting with opportunities, interviews, keynote invitations, media pitches, even offers to write a memoir. Suddenly, people who once walked past me without a glance now quoted my story in LinkedIn posts and strategy meetings. It was surreal, but also strangely quiet in a way that only someone who had fought in silence for a decade could appreciate. But while the noise around me grew, inside I felt something different. I wasn't overwhelmed. I wasn't intoxicated by the praise. I was calm. That evening, I sat on the terrace of my brownstone, a place no one in my family even knew I owned. It was a modest home by my current means, but I loved it more than the penthouse. There was ivy on the walls, a bubbling stone fountain I'd picked out myself, and enough sky to make the world feel open. My dog Luna curled up beside me, her soft snores breaking the silence. I had tea in one hand, a blanket draped over my legs, and for the first time in years, I wasn't planning. I wasn't building. I was simply sitting still. And it felt good. The week had been a whirlwind. I had turned down 5 interviews, 3 business podcasts, and a reality show pitch. Because I didn't need to perform. I'd already told my story. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life retelling it for cameras and clicks. Then, my phone buzzed. It was the family group chat. For a moment, I hesitated, out of habit more than fear, but I opened it. Mom, dinner next Sunday. You don't have to bring anything. Just come. We'd love to hear more about what you're building. That was it. No judgment. No qualifiers. Just an invitation. It wasn't an apology, but it was something softer, something closer to beginning again. I thought about the years I'd spent hungry, not just for food, but for belief. For someone to ask, "What are you dreaming of?" and mean it. I thought about Grandma, and how she was the only one who saw past what I did and focused on who I was becoming. I pulled an old flyer from the drawer beside me. My first Sterling Haven brochure, printed at a 24-hour copy shop, crooked lines, faded ink. I stared at it for a long time. And then I whispered like a prayer, "We made it." Because I had, not just to wealth or success, but to peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from proving people wrong, but the kind that comes from finally knowing you were right to believe in yourself all along. Weeks passed, and the media buzz gradually faded into background chatter. People moved on to the next headline, the next viral story. And honestly, I was relieved. I hadn't built Sterling Haven for applause or public recognition. I built it for something quieter, freedom, dignity, and the kind of peace that doesn't need to be posted online. One quiet Sunday, I drove out to the cemetery where my grandmother was buried. The air was warm. The light filtered gently through old trees, and the world felt still. I brought fresh tulips, her favorite, and sat beside her grave for a long time. The headstone was clean, familiar. I brushed away a few stray leaves and placed something at its base, the original Sterling Haven flyer. Faded, creased, a little torn at the edges. It had lived in the back of my drawer for years, a quiet reminder of where it all began. "You were right?" I whispered. "You always were." I told her about the company, about Luna, about the dinner with my family, and how, for once, they had looked at me and really seen me. Not as a failure. Not as a burden. But as something real. And the truth settled in my chest like warmth. I hadn't built this life out of anger. I hadn't built it to prove anyone wrong. I had built it to prove myself right. That I was worthy. That I was capable. That I didn't need anyone's permission to matter. That night, back in my kitchen, barefoot and stirring soup with the dog at my feet, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: stillness. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from silence, but from certainty. I didn't feel powerful or famous or even successful. I just felt whole, and that, more than anything, was enough. Sometimes, the people closest to you won't believe in your dreams. Not because they're cruel, but because they've never seen someone like you do something like that. But you don't need everyone's belief. You just need your own. Keep building quietly. One day your silence will speak louder than their doubts. If this message touched you, leave a comment below. Share your story. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that remind you your path is valid, even if no one else sees it yet.